Welcome back to the Substantiate podcast. I know it's been a couple weeks, but we're back and hopefully more consistently. It has been a busy last couple of weeks, starting high school, getting things going, and I meant to record and release a couple episodes in between talking about the NFL and other current sports, but that ultimately didn't happen, got a little too tied up. So now I have this episode. I recorded it last Friday with Joshua, who you'll hear from in a minute. He's got a podcast of his own about the NBA, which I will be a guest on sometime over the next week. And, make sure to check all of Instagram and Twitter at SubstantiatePod. Thank you for following. And so I'm not going to take up too much time up front here, but basically Joshua and I today, we talked about NFL matchups coming up this weekend, and what if those teams played against each other in basketball. So that is what Joshua and I have here. Again, hopefully more consistent episodes coming in the future, but for now, this is what we have. Today, I'm joined by Joshua Unangst, and we're going to be talking about the Week 5 NFL matchups, but taking some of the best players from each team and seeing how they would compete playing 5-on-5 basketball versus each other. So, how are you today, Joshua?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Good. So, you have a podcast of your own about the NBA. Would you like to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so it's called it's pretty much called Courts Heat the podcast. But basically what we pretty much talk about is just like all the breaking news. Then of course we've been having our every weekly series and whatnot. And this week we've been talking about all the different divisional teams. And then we're going to wrap it up by talking about all the best team in each conference. We're basically just breaking everything down. So what we see, especially in the NBA, if something huge is happening, that's just going to be our explosion topic on the podcast. But it's pretty much all NBA all the time, and it just comes out fire high, as we know about majority of all sports, and when it's in the season and off season.
So one-stop shop for everything NBA?
Pretty much. in that hour and 30, we cover a lot. I'm surprised it doesn't go over, because we just put so much in there that it's wow. You're really going to have to pay attention, or you're going to make your mind explode. It's 1 to 2.
Yep. And then sometime this will be released on Wednesday in the first week of October, but whatever that day is. And then sometime this weekend or early the next week, I will be a guest on Courtside Heat. And so you can listen to that and make sure to follow on Instagram and Twitter to find links to all that at SubstantiatePod, as always. And let's get into the first matchup here, which is going to be Rams at Seahawks, Thursday night football. So tomorrow night by the time this is released. And again, we're recording this before week 4. So if anything big happens on Sunday, then we are bound by the laws of physics and cannot talk about the future. But this Rams versus Seahawks matchup, we have the Rams, who are currently 3-0, and the Seahawks 1-2. The Seahawks have lost a couple of close games, including one in overtime. And what do just the overall records say about these teams here, and what kinds of qualities will translate to the hard court?
It's really interesting, because when I look at the Rams, when we saw the Matthew Stafford trade happen between Jared Goff and him, people were excited, but they're also having doubts in their mind. But now looking at Matthew Stafford in this season, he has exploded. Like, he's one of the top quarterbacks in the league right now, and rightfully so. Him and Cooper Kupp and everyone else has just been dominating. Just imagine the last game. It was against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They saw Tom Brady was going to win, but they pulled up. I guess you could call it upset. But they won in dominant fashion, especially their defense. And the thing about Seattle, and I guess I'm going to be kind of biased because I'm a Cardinals fan, everything. So whatever happens in that division is just pretty much where is the Cardinals against everyone else, pretty much that mentality. But with the Seahawks, the one thing that's going to be their Achilles heel is going to be their offensive line. It's actually kind of been better in a way. Like, Russell Wilson has been doing better this year, like not taking as many hits, pressure, sacks, things like that. So you got that going. Plus, DK Metcalf hasn't been bad. So there's pros and cons to both sides. But when looking at it, I would put the favorable team at the Rams just because of how dominant they are on offense and on defense.
Yeah, so now looking at Aaron Donald, he's probably the biggest name on the Rams and maybe one of the biggest players. So what position do you think he would slot into in basketball?
Oh my. Like, I've seen him play. I've seen him do workouts and everything when he records those things. Like, he is physically challenging and he just loves being physical. Like, he's huge. So looking at that, that's tough. To me, he's going to be more of a defensive player. And now with that jump, he could be like a Dennis Rodman. I would actually put him at like the power forward. I would put him like in one of the 4 positions because I think he could play that. I really do think he can.
Now, he is 6'1" and 280 pounds and a strong dude. So obviously this isn't NBA, so not everyone's going to be 6'6". And
right.
Especially when you're looking at going up against Russell Wilson, who's like 5'11" or something. And he's got another short receiver with him in Tyler Lockett, and then also DK Metcalf, who's a big receiver. So when you look at, let's say, those three against Aaron Donald and any other Rams you want to pick on defense, so whether that's Jalen Ramsey or anyone else from the offense, maybe Cooper Kupp or Matt Stafford, then how do you see this defensive strong side on the Rams against a couple smaller Seahawks and a bigger Seahawk in DK Metcalf?
It's like, because going back like to Aaron Donald, whatever you're saying, what we're talking about, he's just physically unmatched. Like, you would have to get, I don't know who you would be able to put him up against because he just finds a way to beat you. So if we're going to try to do Aaron Donald against Russell Wilson, give like one of those scenarios in the offensive line, he's going to win that all day. Now, the one thing I will say, Jalen Ramsey is a really good cornerback, but if DK Metcalf's feeling it, it's going to be very close, but I would give that to DK because DK is also very physical. Plus, he's able to jump. He's able to jump really high, and if there's like a 50-50 ball, majority of the time it's going to go to DK just because he's been there, done that in college and in the NFL.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, how tall is he? Let's see. But he's obviously very fast, as we saw last year, chasing down the interception in one of the plays of the year against the Cardinals. He's sort of just like a bit of a juxtaposition compared to Tyler Lockett and Wilson in that sense, but that could really complement each other on the basketball court. And when you're looking at some shooting on these teams, obviously, if you're comparing Russell Wilson's accuracy as a quarterback to being able to hit jump shots, then they'll look good from that end. And when we sort of flip it now, if we looked at the Rams on offense and the Seahawks on defense, then who do you think is going to be some big defensive key parts for the Seahawks?
The thing is that they're going to have to work on and whatnot is not getting burned. They just can't get torched. And what I mean by that is, especially in the secondary, because you see it with Cooper Kupp, and you see it with all these different guys, they're just getting wide open. Whether that just be on science or different types of routes like that, they're finding ways to get open. So their secondary is going to get burned, especially with Cooper Kupp and everyone else that's speedy on there because Matthew Stafford's just been able to find all those good looks. So that's going to be tough. Some of them playing, who's even on like the Seahawks defense? I know they got some notable players, but it's downgraded over the years. Like I know they have Jamal. Oh yeah, they have Jamal Adams, but it just can't be Jamal the entire time.
Yeah, another loss for the Jets, as we were talking about before we started recording, with losing Jamal Adams, although I believe they did get a few draft picks back. But Jamal Adams, agreed, has been a large part of the Seahawks defense. And just scrolling through the names here, not too many well-known players, but ultimately they come out there every week and you sort of know what you're getting from the Seattle defense. Like, they're not great, but they're sturdy, and obviously they won a Super Bowl less than a decade ago, so they're not that bad. And, you know, considering that they have many of the same parts, including Russell Wilson. So,
Right.
So when you have all of that, they're ultimately mostly consistent and reliable, which obviously, it works in football and basketball. If you can be consistent defensively, then it takes some of the pressure off of it, off of offense, and can allow you to focus more there. So then I guess the question is, and you're talking about separation, then let's say Lockett and Metcalf can get some kind of separation when the Seahawks are on offense in this basketball game, then are they the kinds of players that you think have the qualities to nail a corner three that's open? Or are they the kind of player that's going to take it, get the open lane, and drive into the net?
I think they can, looking at everything, look at the qualities, they can shoot a corner free, but I think their tendencies, I think what they're really going to be good at would be driving because, again, they got the speed, they got the physicality. Like, because football is much tougher than basketball because with basketball, there's not much contact. There's a reason why football has to wear pad and whatnot. But I could so see him going down the lane, getting an open look and just taking it, or even putting a little contact on that, or even like getting a second chance basket. Like that would be their specialty. That would be where I would categorize them at. Like they can actually be a slasher. I would put him as a shooter that drives all day.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and especially with DK Metcalf's height. Like, even Aaron Donald there is 3 inches shorter, so I think Metcalf will be able to have his way around. So then you look at it in that sense, and you're looking at a really good offense versus a really good defense and a pretty good offense. Where do you think this game is going?
That's interesting. So I always like close games. I don't. Well, if it lasts Suns, then I really don't like. Big faraway games. But I like things that would come down to the buzzer. And with these matchups, I would take that down to the buzzer, or at least get within the last 2 minutes of the game. I think that both sides, both matchups, sure, take it down to the last 2 minutes. They can do that. Final minute, and then. Sure, I think how it could play out is you get down to the final 2 minutes, then the best side go back and forth, and then it would just come like between like 5 to 7 points, right? And then it will just start to get out to the lead, and it's like, okay, now we know what we're dealing with. Now we know that this side's clearly better within the final minute when the pressure's finally on. So that's how I'll view it.
Yeah, that makes sense there. Ultimately, though, which way do you think this is going? Is this a win for the Seahawks or the Rams?
I'm gonna have to say the Rams, just because to me they're more dominant, more athletic. I can be wrong on I say I am wrong with DK Metcalf and Cooper Kupp, but taking the team as a whole, the Rams are more athletic and more dominant and just an overall better team, in my opinion. That's how I view the Rams against the Seahawks.
Yeah, totally agreed. And when you just look at the Rams' offensive firepower, they have so many weapons they can get you right now that they have Matt Stafford, a excellent quarterback, and they have Tyler Higbee, the tight end, who's making his way up there to be considered among one of the elite tight ends in the league. And you have Darrell Henderson, another running back that made a name for himself last year and is continuing to improve this year. I know he was hurt for a week, but hopefully coming back in week 4. And then you have Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, and you have all of these targets. And ultimately, I would agree that coming off of the bench in this game could just overwhelm some of the Seahawks.
Yeah, and I also want to point back to something you actually said that got me thinking about good quality defense, because I've always been a believer in a defense win championships because it's great. Take Portland. Portland is a great example. So last year during the NBA postseason, we saw the matchup between the Denver Nuggets and the Portland Trailblazers. The one thing that was really inconsistent from the Blazers was defense, because Dan Miller was scoring 50-plus points a game. He had put them into some great overtime matchups, some great overtime positions. But the problem that they faced and what the Nuggets figured out was that if they're not going to play defense, and then now we have Jamal Murray, or not him, we have Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., and Jokic all right there, and they can just attack. Because if they're not going to play defense, they're not going to play up, then what's the point? And I think that can also translate into football, because the basic concepts of defense is to defend your opponent, not to score. So at that basis, I think defense is really important, because we've seen many Super Bowls. Actually, since talking about the Seahawks against Patriots came down to a defensive play by Malcolm Butler. So it's like one of those things. Defense is very critical to win a championship. See, it just depends on the matchup and whatnot, but 9 out of 10 times, defense is going to rule.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And you even look at the two most recent NBA champions. You have the 2019-20 Lakers, who, that was their whole identity as a team, right? You've got LeBron James and Anthony Davis. That's most of the offense. Then you had playoff Rondo and KCP hitting threes. You see this Bucks team and their star, who won back-to-back MVPs. He's not a three-point shooter, right? Steph Curry won championships on outscoring the opponents, but the Bucks have a bit more of the magic of, okay, Giannis is also a gigantic athletic Greek freak, if you will, and and just maximizing that on defense along with other big and good defensive players there. Brook Lopez, another big guy. And then, I mean, obviously to win a championship, you still have to have some form of offense, but I do agree with that, and as proven with the two most recent examples in the NBA. All right, so that was matchup number 1. We've got Rams and Seahawks. We're not going to go through every game here, but one thing to note, Jets at Falcons is in London, but two not so great teams, so we're just going to skip ahead to Packers at Bengals. At this time, the Bengals out of nowhere are 3-1, reuniting Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. There it is. And they're back together. They haven't skipped a beat chemistry-wise. And then you have the Packers, who took a surprising Week 1 loss, but have really bounced back. Aaron Jones has gone crazy. Aaron Rodgers has been a little more laid back, but he's still played through. So who are some of the players on either of these teams that you think will shine playing basketball?
Number 1, Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is just very impressive to me. And I'm actually going to go back a little bit. Was it Packers against 49ers? Yeah, because the Jimmy Garoppolo drove all the way down, scored, but then they left 37 seconds left. What's more impressive to me was that in 2 minutes, real time and whatnot, Devontae Adams was able to come out after getting a nasty shot to the head and come back in. And he made unbelievable plays. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I can actually see him playing basketball, because he's a tough guy. He's a physical guy. He's able to do so much. He has great hands. he has great speed. If he wanted to be a shooter, passer combo, he could. He could legit be that because majority of like NBA guys that are point guards, shooting guards, are combining those two rules. So if you want to combine those two rules for Devontae Adams, sure, go ahead because I can actually see him averaging 5 to 7 assists per game and like 18 or 20 points just per game using different numbers like that because he's just very dominant, and I believe that can actually translate. And then imagine what you can do on a basketball court with all that speed. Put speed and physicality without turf and just surface. Yeah, I think he would be amazing.
Yeah, and then you combine that with the speed of Aaron Jones on transitions. How are you going to be able to stop them?
I don't think you can. I just don't think you can.
And that goes both ways on the floor. You're running up on offense to where, you could have a 2-on-0 or a 2-on-1 or even a 2-on-2 instead of a 1-on-2 and needing to wait for the offense to set up. And then instead you have these two electric players that are superstars in their own rights, both on the same team. And then if they're running back on transition back to defense, they're both physical guys, not afraid to get in there. Obviously, they both play football, and so they can handle contact. And another thing here is that when you're looking at more specifically these two offenses, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon compared to Rodgers, Adams, and Aaron Jones, right? These are young guys versus, Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones aren't that old, but they've been in the league longer. So
right.
How do you think the difference in experience will translate?
Difference in experience? Look, I'm going to take the quarterback position because it's really important what you said. Aaron Rodgers against Joe Burrow, because Aaron Rodgers been there, done that. Because what we saw in those late minute games, in those late 30-second games, he's been there, done that. He's had Hail Mary wins. He's done all of that. So we all knows the pressure. So if it came down to a pressure situation, he wouldn't be phased, but Joe Burrow would. But that comes from experience. That comes from trial and error. And the experience plays a large part in a quarterback, especially when experienced, because they know where to throw it, where to time it, how to execute it. And Joe Burrow is still trying to get his footing, feeding into the NFL, especially last season, having his season cut short by an ACL tear. Experience is going to play a huge role in that because Aaron Rodgers has done everything, won a Super Bowl, and he's just had no players around him, the players around him, to where Joe Burrow, he's with the Bengals in his second year, and he's still trying to figure everything out, still trying to build off that chemistry and just trying to figure out the game as it's going. Experience would play a huge role in that, especially for the quarterback position.
Yeah, and another thing, like when you think about, don't give this quarterback the ball with 2 minutes to go or with 59 seconds and 3 timeouts left. And Aaron Rodgers is one of those quarterbacks. Tom Brady is one of those quarterbacks, right? There's a certain number of players in the league where you can say that about. And Joe Burrow might very well one day become one of those players, but right now he's not at that point. And when you think about sort of the comparison between a quarterback and a point guard, right? The point guard is bringing the ball up the court. He's at the start of the play, just like the quarterback is. You can argue the center, but it's really the quarterback. Right. But in that sense, and I feel like you see it often more times in college hoops than in the NBA, but the quarterback doesn't always have to be, the point guard doesn't always have to be this big, shiny, flashy object. He just has to know what to do with the ball, right? You can get, so long as he can make a pass to the star on the team, then you can play successfully. And in the NFL, passing is the main job of the quarterback. And right. If they can't do that well, then you don't succeed. So when you're elite at that level, then I think you can be elite in as a quarterback as a point guard in the sense of seeing the floor and knowing your targets.
And you want to know one example I was just thinking of? And I get their teammates and whatnot, but to me, think of the Phoenix Suns. You got Chris Paul. That to me, going by experience, of course, would be Aaron Rodgers, and Cameron Payne would be Joe Burrow, because Chris Paul has gone for those learning pains. He's gone for those learning moments. Cameron Payne, sure, he's had a lot of ups and downs, but not as much experience as Chris Paul in the NBA. And just last year was truly Cameron Payne's first year actually in the NBA on a starting team and actually competing for something. So that's like one example I always think about between Burrow and Rodgers. So I think it's a valid one. I think there's also a few other ones, but that's the main one I'm going to stick with.
Yeah, and I'm curious, where does DeAndre Ayton fall in this? And what NFL players like him?
Oh my, that's actually a very good question, because DeAndre has been up and down, but he would obviously be a defensive player to me on a basketball team. But or maybe he could even be a tight end, but he would be a good tight end. But looking at defense, if I had to pick one, maybe looking at it, maybe Von Bell. I don't know. Just throwing it out on the Bengals, because there's no one really particular in my mind, but he would either be like positioned between a defensive player or a tight end. I guess him as defensive back, because he's big enough. He's getting that muscle to be a defensive back, right? Or someone close there to be. He's no Aaron Donald by his imagination.
Yeah, and also, to my knowledge, there's no player in the NFL that's 6'11", 250.
No, like that would be one very tall NFL player. Hey, at that rate, we could just have him play quarterback. He can see over everything. He would just need to learn accuracy. That's pretty much.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you that question. If you had to choose out of these two teams, who would DeAndre remind you of? Defensively or offensively?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, if you look at someone like him, at least one point last year, he was averaging like 14 rebounds a game or some crazy number like that, right? So clearly averaging a double-double. But when you look at the center argument in center in basketball, and you see, okay, well, assists aren't exactly what the Phoenix Suns are looking at him for. That's why they have Chris Paul, who's near the top of the all-time list. But when you sort of try to make that switch into, if you go with the quarterback analogy in football and just being bigger, I mean, it's kind of funny because both of these examples come from the same team, but Drew Lock was a very tall quarterback for the Broncos. I forget if it was a true story or just something that happened in practice, but the Broncos put him on the field goal blocking unit to just stand behind the defensive line and put your hand up and try to get a hand on it, because I think he was 6'3". And then also, I'm pretty sure it was also the Broncos last year that went with like a wide receiver as their quarterback for a game, because all their quarterbacks, due to health and safety protocols, could not play. I mean, I feel like he could do that if you really needed him to, but I think I'd have to lean more towards almost a special teams player, just someone that can be used in those special scenarios.
Yeah, because DeAndre Ayton, to me, and I think what the team's really using him for, they have a lot of offensive talent, but defense they're good at. But having that huge center, having that huge body blocking the gaps, just filling everything out, is what he's mainly used for. So special teams or even a defense player, but mainly special teams will work out for him. Just imagine him running on an NFL field about to explode the guy. I actually believe he can truck somebody. If he wanted to, I think he could.
Yeah, I mean, like, if he just put his arms straight, that would be going right into their head. So he might have to worry about some face mask penalties if he was returning a kick or something, but with a stiff arm. But I mean, he's just so big. He would look like a giant out on the field.
I was just looking this up. His wingspan is 7'6".
Oh my God.
I know. I'm like, wow, imagine him on special teams. No one's going to be able to kick a field goal anymore if he's on the field. Just imagine that. Even like a little piece of the ball, he'll make an impact. That's pretty funny to see.
Yeah, not just that, but also, right, like the reason why they moved the touchback from the 20-yard line to the 25-yard line on kickoffs is because that's one of, if not the most dangerous play in football when you've got two guys running full steam right at each other. But, I mean, he just has to stand there with his arms out like he's playing defense in basketball, and you can't run around him. That's physically impossible.
Imagine him like on Hail Mary attempt. He's out there trying to block it, trying to defend against that. He actually could. He would just have to reach his arm up. That's it. That's all he has to do.
Exactly. He would be perfect for some of those special teams options and in some prevent defense. But but back with the Bengals and the Packers here, again, both teams are weighted more on the offense side. So who do you think is going to have this advantage? Which way is the experience going to work out? Is it going to be the deciding factor in this game, going for the Packers, or will the Bengals, just maybe being a little younger, maybe a little more pep in the step, will maybe try to push the pace?
That's a really good question. And here's how I would feel. I think for this case especially, I think that while you have inexperienced guys, you would want to go with younger guys, right? But as we've seen time and time again with Aaron Rodgers, with Devontae Adams, with that core Randall Cobb, all these different guys, I think just the experience, I think the wisdom, I just think that being in that game longer, having all that firepower, because it's not like we have a mid-30, 30-some-odd-year-old Aaron Rodgers that's slowing down. He's still slinging that real hard. He's still going for the pace. So looking at that, now if you have like a depleting quarterback that really couldn't do anything anymore, I would take the younger guys. But in the case of Packers and Aaron Rodgers, I'm favoring now with them because they have all firepower on offensive. And Aaron Rodgers just has to pinpoint that on a deep pass, and more likely Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb, or anyone else would just come down with it. Or even taking the backfield of Aaron Jones. No one's going to stop him because I actually believe Aaron Jones is better than Joe Mixon because Joe Mixon was good coming out of college. His first year was good. He still had hype, but now it's just like, oh, now the hype's just dropped, and they're like, okay, this is what we're really dealing with. Now, if Aaron Jones coming off a really good last season, we're like, yeah, this is going to work for the backfield of Green Bay. So 10 out of 10 times, I'm going to side with Green Bay. I think Green Bay is going to pull it off against the Bengals.
Yeah, and are there any NBA teams that you could sort of compare here? An old team versus a younger team that, again, even if the pushing the pace doesn't necessarily fit perfectly, because Aaron Rodgers, like you said, he can still throw and he can still play. But is there any team comparison that you see in the NBA?
For the Bengals, I'm going to take the Chicago Bulls because the Bulls, while Lonzo Ball is experienced, you have all these different guys. I get DeMar DeRozan, but I'm going to take him out of the equation real quick. These are still relatively young guys. And Lonzo Ball played with a really bad Lakers team before the Lakers and Gianna LeBron traded him. And then he goes down to New Orleans, and we all know how that went with Alvin Gentry and Stan Van Gundy. So it's going to be a real fresh start for him with a good head coach in Billy Donovan. So for inexperience, and when you see Alex Caruso finally getting a shot, you see Kobe White, Zach LaVine, that to me is going to be the Bengals. That's why I say it's the Bengals, because you still have those inexperienced, they're still trying to learn, but then they also have that talent to them. And for the Packers, and this is going by age and experience and whatnot, I would almost have to say the Lakers, because their firepower is going to equivalent to the Lakers. I just think it has to, especially in age, wisdom, just knowing the game and knowing how to play both sides, especially in basketball. They have all perfect qualities for both teams to be compared. That's how I view them. That's how I view the Lakers and Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers, they go out and they sign all of these players that are like in the 36 plus range, right? They signed, I forget who it was, but they signed, or which one it was, but they signed a 34-year-old to lower the average age on the team, right? Like the fact that all of these players, or almost all of them that they've signed, have been on the Lakers before. Coincidentally, almost none of them overlapping, but they've all been there before, and they're just older. And sometimes you have to wonder what Rob Pelinka is thinking when you're going to these players that aren't necessarily defensive stars, right? Which is some of the identity over the last couple of years of the Lakers, and just going older here with some players that hopefully will bring the shooting back. But ultimately, yeah, I think that the Bulls there, the Lakers might have more talent because of the 3 stars now, but the Bulls...
The free stars help, but the one thing, and you're going to talk about age, Carmelo Anthony's 37 years old. Like, he's only been back in the league for like 3 years now. The only guy that's young is Malik Monk at 24 years old that actually gets starting minutes. But besides that, everyone's above the age of 29. And the highest one is 37 years old. Russell Westbrook's 32 years old. But I have some doubts about him, how he's actually going to play. But with LeBron, I don't think he's going to get out of the line. But yeah, it's just a lot of older age players. Because that bench that they have Trevor Ariza. He's old. Dwight Howard. He's old. And then you see, I don't want to call them scrubs, but to be frank about it, they have Kendrick Nunn. And for the record, Kendrick Nunn averages a point per game. That happened last season. There was a reason why. Was it Celtics? It's one of the teams wanted to get rid of him. Well, it was either the Heat or the Celtics. But that's the reason why they wanted to get rid of him. Because he was supposed to be something, but he was drafted way too soon, especially for the productivity he's putting up. But it's really interesting. So going off at age and whatnot, the Lakers are really old. But I guess you could put that in average. They're still like around 30 years old, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Okay. So I pulled it up while you were talking. So every team, 29 teams in the NBA range from 23.5 years old to 28.8. So just a little bit over 5 years. And then so the youngest being OKC at 23 and a half, which kind of makes sense because they traded everyone they had away. I mean, it's kind of interesting what they're doing. You could almost do it as like an infinite farm for draft picks. Like, okay, just come in, get a guy. He's a second-round pick. Ooh, okay, well, we developed him, so now he's worth 2 second-round picks. Trade him away, and then repeat and repeat. But the Lakers then are 2.1 years on average older than the second oldest team in the league with the Heat. 28.8 years for the Heat and 30.9 for the Lakers, which is crazy. But then you look at the third team, the Milwaukee Bucks at 27.9. Those 3 teams have each made it to the finals in the last 2 years, 2 of which have won. So
yeah, maybe older's now in style. Maybe that's what everyone's missing. Why go younger? Maybe that's the Warriors. Maybe that's why Curry didn't want to get younger guys. He wants to go back to championship. So get a bunch of 38-year-olds. Let's see how this goes.
Yeah, why not? So I think that game is going to the Packers there over the Bengals. But that game in real life will really be something to watch, with the Bengals at this point 3-1 and the Packers 2-1. See if the Packers can continue their recovery from that devastating loss to New Orleans. So you've probably heard me talk about Built Bar before, and I'm going to talk about it again because they are just that good. They currently have 3 limited time flavors out right now. There is churro, cherry lime, and mint marshmallow. And churro is one of my favorite bars of all time. I got it when it first came out last spring. It was one of the first bars I ever had, so I will be ordering a box of those later. And they really have a flavor for everyone. Earlier today, I ate a mint brownie. Lately, I've been eating a lot of double chocolate, and they really are just that good. You can go onto their website, built.com, take a look at all of the nutrition facts about each one, and they also have a chart that compares all of their nutrition facts to other protein bars. Spoiler, theirs compares pretty well compared to all the others. And they also have a chart comparing themselves to other candy bars because they really are just that good. They are like candy. There's some times where, it's around dessert time and I want some chocolate, but instead of going for actual chocolate, I'll just go with double chocolate, a healthier option, and that will satisfy my chocolate need. So all of these bars, they are covered in 100% chocolate. You can go to built.com. They also have smaller ones, Built Bites, and a couple other products there, including Built Broth and Built Boost. So you can check all of that out, built.com. Code substantiate, save yourself 10% off on built.com. Right, so now we'll skip Lions at Vikings and Broncos at Steelers, but let's move on to, I know you liked this game before we started recording, Eagles at Panthers. So this game, like we were talking about, you have Sam Darnold, who's had a fantastic start to his new home, really, in Carolina, 3-0. I'm not sure how many wins he had as a Jet total, but he might beat that this year on one team. But
I don't know, but last year I read something. He only had 2 wins last year, so he already beat last season. It'll be fun to see what the total numbers will be.
Yeah, and it'll also be interesting to see without Christian McCaffrey for now, but I think 4 to 6 weeks is the timeline on him. But then you flip it here and you have the Eagles, who are 1-2, their only win being against the Falcons, same city, wrong team. But then you have, again, the Eagles a bit younger with Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith, I think. And then the Panthers with McCaffrey, who's now a little older, and Darnold, who is still young despite being a veteran in the league at this point. But these two teams coming up against each other, how is this going to look with the Panthers being off to a fast start and the Eagles taking it slow?
No doubt momentum's going to play effect into this game. To me, the Eagles, I was looking over their roster. Their top 5 players include two out of the 5 of them. Their best players were offensive linemen. That should say something. And then we talk about the experience of Jalen Hurts and whatnot, because he's been putting up some really bad numbers over the course of this season. Zach Ertz is good. Devonta Smith isn't bad as things go. But to look at the Panthers and whatnot, you got Sam Darnold. And it shows that when you give a quarterback, even after a really bad start to his career, can really make a difference. Because if you get him wide receivers, if you give him all these different guys, give him a good offensive line, he could really turn it around. And that's what I've just been seeing from the Panthers. So there's a difference between what the Panthers are doing and what the Eagles are doing. It seems like the Eagles, to me, are taking more of a rebuilding approach. Like they're trying to make this like a multi-year process, where the Panthers are like, you know what, let's just win now. Let's just try to make the best of it. To try to just say, you know what, we'll keep improving each season in the off season, but we want to win now. And because they have really good wide receivers, which helps. And that's one thing that the Eagles don't have. And they've had taken wide receiver declines, and they have taken so many wide receivers. They boiled them all the way down. They wanted out, and now they're just left with Smith and different guys like that. So looking at everything in total, I would give it to Darnold's team.
Yeah. I mean, an interesting thing with Sam Darnold, obviously being coached under Adam Gase for, I think it was 2 years. And I mean, you look at the last two quarterbacks that Adam Gase coached. Ryan Tannehill goes to Tennessee and becomes a somewhat star there. And Sam Darnold goes to Carolina and starts playing well there so far. Obviously, only 3 weeks in here, but so far, so good. And it seems like the formula is if you're a quarterback under Adam Gase, then you just got to go to a Southeastern team and you'll start playing well. So
yeah, it worked out well for Ryan Tannehill under when he got away from Adam Gase. He got $100+ million contract, so he's alive.
Yeah, Sam Darnold also, I guess his rookie contract expires. I think this is his 4th year, so I guess he would have one more year because he was a first-round pick. But yeah, I mean, just the Panthers and the Eagles, like the Panthers are basically better than the Eagles at every way, except you could argue the offensive line maybe. But right, you've got Darnold versus Jalen Hurts, and every day of the week right now taking Sam Darnold. Miles Sanders versus Christian McCaffrey every day. And then, Devonta Smith versus, what's his face? Moore. What's his first name?
DJ.
Yeah, DJ Moore. Then, okay, maybe the way Smith has played so far, maybe not, but talent-wise, you can argue that Smith is better. But, just in every sense, it seems like the Panthers are better. And for the Eagles, let's say they tried to exploit that strength of their offensive line, then how would they try to use that strength playing basketball?
I think trying to use that strength, because I think a lot of it's going to come from pass rushing. So if we're going to try to crack down on the offensive line, put that in basketball terms, they're just going to play some really solid D. Like, if we're talking about defense right now, they're just going to crack down. They're going to make them stop. They're going to get this time defense stoppages, just make them pick up their dribble and have to pass it. They're gonna play almost like an isolation, like an ISO, just from the perspective, like, if we're able to trap you here and we're able to isolate your best players, perfect. That's all we have to do. And it really puts you in a tough jam for those next 24 seconds, or how many seconds remaining on the shot clock. But that's how I think it would translate for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And coincidentally, you got 5 offensive linemen and 5 spots on the floor. But that would be sort of an interesting unit to see out there. Just 5 big guys, not too fast, but super strong. And they might not put up much on offense, but if it comes down to it, maybe, the other team is coming down the floor for a last-second shot. Why not? Put them out there. So that game is going to the Panthers. And so let's start to wrap it up there. And there are still more great matchups to come this week in football. There is, I believe it was Chiefs at Bills on Sunday night. So that'll be an exciting game. Always got to look out for the Raiders right now, see if they'll fall off of their high right now. But ultimately, the NFL season has been really fun to watch so far, even as a 0-3 Giants fan. But we'll see how it turns out, and there's always hope for next year. So thanks for coming on, Joshua, and all the listeners. Make sure to check out his podcast. Scroll down to the show notes, and make sure to follow on Twitter for an update on when that episode is coming out, where I will be guesting on it. And so, Joshua, where can the listeners find you on social media?
So where you can mainly find us, we have many, but the top places you can find us at would be Instagram.com/courtsideheatNBA. And then, of course, you can find us at Twitter.com/courtsideheat, Facebook.com/courtsideheat. And if you're a Tumblr user, just go to Tumblr.com/courtsideheat. And that's pretty much where you can find us.
Nice. So I'll put all of those social links down in the show notes as well. And this has been great, Joshua. And hopefully, I know I'll be talking to you again soon next week when we record that episode. But until then, thanks for coming on, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been really nice. I like coming on here. Maybe we could do this again. I know we got next week, but yeah, I like talking about these different hypothetical matches. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, definitely. Again, hope you enjoyed that episode. It was tons of fun to record with Joshua. Again, you can find all the links to his podcast down in the show notes. And come back next week for, fingers crossed, another episode, whether it's about the NFL, most likely, or another hypothetical sports matchup. And, of course, at Substantiate Pod on Instagram and Twitter. And that is going to do it here today. So come back next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Substantiate. The best way to help support the show is to, number one, tell your friends about Substantiate. That is the number one way to support us. The second way is to leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. Number 3, follow us at SubstantiatePod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Hello, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
And we're hosts of Capes on the Couch, the podcast where comics get counseling.
Superheroes don't always get to go home happy. That's where we come in.
We offer psychiatric and mental health analysis of comic book characters.
So check us out at capesonthecouch.live and across all social media platforms at Capes on the Couch.